And we are good to go. Thank you so much for joining us for another HRAI webinar. Today, we're talking Canada's Federal Plastics Registry, what HVAC companies need to know. We have Bruce Calder from Cleggan Environmental, who's going to take you through everything you need to know. And at the end, you can ask him some questions. So if you'd like to do so, please put them in chat or the Q&A button. And we heavily suggest you do so. We've got an expert on the line, and we want you to make best use of the time. So without further ado, Bruce, I'd like to invite you to the call. There he is.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, thank you. Just going to
And
share right now.
wonderful. And just one more thing, we are recording this. It will be available on HRAI's YouTube page shortly after the presentation. So you can catch us there again. Feel free to share. And again, if you'd like to post any questions, you can do so in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Bruce, take it away.
Thank you. No, one of the great things about the YouTube version is some of the material I might speak quickly, just so you have the material, but might not mean as much right now. One of the nice things about YouTube is you can slow me down later, which can be useful in different sections. Okay, so Clegg Environmental, I'm the VP of Consulting Services here at Clegg. What do? We prevent ADHD, we prevent cancer, and we trace conflict minerals, tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold to the warlords in the Congo. From this, we got a lot into materials and then the plastics register. So up until now in Canada, you would have seen us more working on PFAS. I'm probably the world's expert on PFAS and physical products. And PFAS, especially the fluoropolymers or plastics, we got more and more involved in plastics, and now we're the leading firm in the plastics registry. So ask any questions you want at the end. I'll get to as many as I possibly can. I have set this up to have a lot of content. However, definitely create a lot of space for Q&A at the end. So a lot of what we do is consulting. So what do you do? Where do you sell? How do you do it? We also have one of the largest labs in North America, which we do use also a bit for plastics registry, especially for smaller products, smaller appliances. Definitely, it's just a lot easier. We do a lot more for European stuff like ROHS or anything you're involved in that space, REACH, PFAS. Machine right there is testing fluorine for PFAS. And of course, conflict minerals or any reporting. So conflict minerals really set us down the path on reporting, and we got very, very good at it. We're probably the top firm in due diligence in the conflict mineral side in the US. I testified at Congress 10 plus years ago on conflict minerals. A lot of our original work is actually in Section 1502 of Dodd-Frank, or at least the final rule in conflict minerals. We've been around a long time. And so everything we're going to talk about is from experience. In terms of the plastics registry, we've done a lot of products for the plastics registry already. Definitely a lot of packaging and consumer, professional. Right now, with the deadline being consumer heavy, a lot of consumer packaging, a lot of large appliances. From a lot of your perspectives, you go, well, that isn't that large. Well, for a lot of people, refrigerators are large. But we've done lots and lots of appliances, especially the medium and large size, but also small ones, tons and tons of small appliances, lots of medical devices, lots of consumer controls, like things that go into your fuse box. And so we have a lot of experience in that too. Then a lot more on the professional side, laboratory equipment, etc., as they prepare for their requirement next year. So huge amount of experience. What I'm going to talk about is how you do it in practice. Before I talk about regulations or science, I'm going to talk dog cartoons. I prefer the dog and cat cartoons. Sometimes I feel like this guide dog. I think sometimes the people in my webinars think of they're just the squirrel or the squirrel. This is Scott Metzger. I like his stuff. To point it out just beforehand, it's a lot like Farside in a way, but dogs and cats. So I'm going to talk a little bit about timelines. I'm going to talk residential versus industrial and some key decision points for the HVAC industry on what's residential and what's industrial. And that changes when you have to do things. The scope, which comes back to a lot of the when, what you have to report. And then that's cool and all, but how do you actually do it? So we talk about representative products, which technically is called the average bill of materials method. The submission site, I'm going to point out where it is and how you get into it. The submission form, I'm going to point out where it is. And if anybody watched the old Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy a million years ago, it's kind of like in the basement, in a drawer, in a room marked Beware the Panther. It's a little hard to find, and I'll show you how to find it. And then, of course, do lots of Q&A. So you can ask me lots and lots of questions about this. And if you think of it, I put it in the Q&A, and I'll try to pick up as many as I can from the Q&A. You can put them in whenever, and I'll get to them at the end. So I'm going to talk about the consumer side. It's actually consumer and professional. So the consumer's deadline. So this is for consumer products. I'll explain the definition differences. What they call phase one. Their reporting is required September 29th, 2025. So just over 2 months from now. Industrial phase two is due September 2026. And we'll talk about a lot of the key questions. One of the earlier ways to look at it is if it's at the bottom of your driveway at the end of life, it's consumer. If it's in my blue bin, say in our lab here, out back, it's industrial. And the purpose being that they're actually funded two different ways. Consumer stream is done by the municipality. So what goes to the bottom of my driveway is done by the municipality or city or similar. The one done at our business, our lab here, we pay for ourselves. It's a very different system. Now, the differentiation isn't quite what bin it ends up in. It's a little bit different. So the key question is your stuff 2025 or 2026? If it's a product in scope, and I'll talk about the products in scope, does the consumer or private residents have the choice of disposal of the product at the end of life? Do they have the choice of it? Yes, then residential. No, then industrial, commercial, institutional. So a good example is whether you make washing machines or you make a water heater, and you sell a water heater to a private residence, and both are electronics and both are in scope of the plastics registry. They're both their plastics in the washing machine and in their packaging. Um, in one of the comments, well, at the end of life, normally when you replace the washing machine, the entity brings back the washing machine, or when you replace the water heater, you take back, usually for a fee, but maybe not, the water heater. And so theoretically, if the installer is taking it back, it's in their waste stream, and that's institutional. And where it comes down to for this is who has the choice. So if the resident still has the choice of who disposes of it, it's residential. So even though, say, your water heater is taken back 90% of the time by professional entities, it's still considered residential for the plastics registry because the private residence has the decision on disposal at the end of life. Whether they dispose themselves, whether they put it at the end of the curb, which you can't do probably for a lot of HVAC, or where they have a professional take it away. It's their decision, and therefore it's residential. So that's the key decision on what products are consumer or residential. It's does a consumer or private residence have the choice of disposal of the product at the end of life? So imagine you sell a mini split to hotels, which is sometimes the room ones are very similar to house ones, if not the same. The hotel has the decision. They're a business that's institutional. So even though they're roughly the same product, and there's a whole bunch of complexity. What if I sell the same product to businesses and residences? You can, within reason, estimate the percentage of each. So for those, of course, in Canada, take an example, Tim Hortons. If they look at the plastic packaging or food contact stuff for their products, or just the coffee lids, what's taken away from Tim Hortons, like you do at the drive-through or take away at the counter, that goes home and that's disposed of by the resident. So that's consumer waste. However, if they buy it and eat it in store and dispose of it in Tim Hortons garbage, it's institutional because it's part of their business. It's kind of an interesting one. Even though the person has decision, they're at the business, so therefore it's institutional. It never leaves. It's part of their operations. So it's an interesting problem. So you can estimate within reason what is your, if you're selling, we have this, what they could be multimeters, whether it's HVAC units, what percentage is sold to homes and what percentage is sold to business within reason. And if it's over 90% one or the other, it's normally safe to count it all as 100% as one or the other and reported in its cycle. So if 95% of your sales of a product are really to businesses and there's certain times where consumers can buy the strangest things, but it's a very small percentage, under 10%. We normally say, hey, it's completely ICI. There's always the onesies and twosies. But anything basically where one or the other is over 10% of the market, you include them in. But it's only their percentage. So imagine 50% of you sell 1,000 units and 50% is to residences, 50% to businesses. You only report the 50% to residences in year one. So year one's only residential. and only the products that go to residential where the consumer has decision at the end of life. Which makes it an interesting question. We talk about Tim Hortons. They have decision when they take it out. Yes, but it's still inside their business. It's part of their business operations. Complicated stuff. So who's responsible for reporting? At the product level, it's the brand owner if located in Canada. So imagine you're reselling, oh, LG. I'll just pick a random brand. If LG has an entity in Canada, they have basically a CRA taxable entity in Canada. LG is responsible, irrespective of the fact you may have imported or sold it. That's LG's problem. But if you're bringing in, we'll say Golden Star, which has, I made that one up, which is actually the old name, I think, for LG. If you bring that in to Canada, and there is no Golden Star entity in Canada, it's the importer. So for the plastic registry, it's the brand owner. So if you're like, hey, I'm just reselling, Carrier products or LG or whomever, and they have entities in Canada, they're reporting. They might ask you questions about sales, but they might not actually. It's the brand owner that's responsible. Unless the brand owner doesn't exist in Canada, then it's the importer. So it's a little bit different. Now, in Canada, you can move the responsibility for reporting to another Canadian entity. It has to be a Canadian entity that reports. You have to have a CRA business number, or really it's an Industry Canada business number. But for example, you could the brand owner could transfer the responsibility to the distributor. I don't know why the distributor take it up, but you could. Or you could transfer responsibility to Cleggan, which we could, but you're going to want to really own your registration. What we normally suggest is we could do it for you. What we suggest is because you'll see the way you register the system, it's attached to a person's tax ID that you want to keep control of that. But we could wed meeting in with you, give you the file to submit, and you'd submit it and basically do it with you. But you're at the end of the day, you control the password. But you can move the reporting from one entity to another if the second entity agrees. Has to be agreed. In absence of an agreement, it's the brand owner if they have located in Canada. So imagine it's LG. If there's an LG Canada, which I'm pretty sure there is, they're responsible for all the LG products, irrespective of how it got into Canada, unless they strike an agreement with somebody else who else agrees to do the reporting. But it's the brand owner's responsible. So this might come up with the questions, but it's the brand owner that has responsibility in Canada. So the scope, phase one, the one right now, is for 2025 reporting. This is for sales and importations the 2025 year of plastics. You don't report air conditioners or water coolers. You report polyethylene in appliances. You report polyester in appliances. It's a little bit different. Consumer electronics, which include appliances. So appliances, consumer appliances are in scope of reporting in September of this year, based on last year's importation and sales. Includes even medical devices, like it's wild. Consumer packaging. What packaging goes with the consumer product? So, for example, imagine you sell a consumer, I don't know, we'll say microwaves. Probably not in this case, but microwaves. And they get, go to Best Buy or a distributor. And Best Buy then sells the individual microwaves. But when the packaging around the microwave is consumer. So the microwave box gets home, consumer opens it, there's plastic packaging, that's consumer. However, when it got shipped originally to Best Buy, it's on a pallet with overwrap. That overwrap is disposed of by Best Buy. That's institutional. That's next year. So it's very much what ends up with the consumer. So you might have, especially when shipping pallets, you might have overwrap and all that kind of thing. That's all institutional. Or you sell a product to another business who takes it apart, then uses it for installation. That theoretically is an interesting question because if it's a consumer product and done by the consumer, then it's consumer packaging. Basically, if you assume the product is consumer, then its immediate packaging is considered consumer. Its overwrap will generally be like for the pallet will be institutional. So there's also some single-use plastics. They're very specific. They're like takeaway containers, like coffee cups, not you. So in this single-use plastics reporting in 2025 are not you, unless you're into like Tim Hortons coffee cups and that's what you sell. Not you. So for the HVAC industry, you're looking at consumer electronics, which includes appliances. I'll talk about some of the scope on that in a moment, and the packaging for either consumer electronics or your spare parts. Interesting thing about spare parts, they're not so imagine, and when we work for refrigerator companies who sell your typical consumer refrigerator, by SKU, the number of refrigerator SKUs is dwarfed by the number of SKUs they have of repair parts. So even though the refrigerators are by value and by mass usually much more than the repair parts, they sell a lot of repair parts. The repair parts are not finished electronics, and the plastics in the repair parts are not reportable. However, their packaging is. So if you sell repair parts for, furnaces and air conditioners and all of that on the consumer side, the repair part's not in scope, but its packaging is. Makes it a little bit easier. What we normally do is create representative models of packaging, then apply that more broadly in your huge number of SKUs of repair parts, whether consumer or industrial. So phase one is all consumer. Again, it's finished electronics, like finished appliances, and their packaging. It also includes the packaging of repair parts that would be bought and disposed of by consumer. If your repair parts are only done by professional installers, consumer never has decision over that packaging. Those are phase two. That's institutional. So I said a lot there without a lot of writing. That's going to be a lot of remembering. Nice thing about YouTube, you'll have a recording. So September 2026, you report the professional electronics. So I have a lab equipment here, which doesn't really apply to you, but your professional HVAC systems, ones for hotels and schools and office buildings and so on and so forth. That one is based on, includes medical devices. I put that as an example of how broad it is. Basically, if anybody knows European EU ROHS, if your product would be in scope of EU ROHS, I know it's European Union, but they use the same categories. They simplified in Canada to use the EU ROHS categories. If your product would have to be ROHS compliant to sell in Europe, then it's in scope here. It's pretty well everything, and I'll talk about what's excluded in a moment. And your professional packaging's in, and then a whole bunch of other stuff, which is normally not you. Apparel, cars are in. That's a fun one to do for us. Construction, so windows and doors and eavesdropping are in. And that's the product you sell. So up and now, so now I've talked about the products you import and sell. Also in scope is waste generated by businesses. So if you have warehousing or operations or stores or restaurants or hospitals or schools, any business, including like the federal government's offices, if you generate over 1 ton of plastic waste a year, then your facilities also have to report the waste generated by the facility. It is separate than your product importation sales, a separate category. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So this is 2026. If you have larger operations in Canada, um, for us, if it's just office, 100 employees will generate enough. You have some, more operational or manufacturing, you generate it pretty quickly. Neat thing about it, say our facility here, our laboratory, we don't quite have 100 employees. We actually don't generate 1 ton of employee waste. For us, our biggest plastic waste are Ziploc bags. We use a lot of Ziploc bags in the lab operationally. Our biggest employee waste, if you ever go through, and we're really good at this, if you ever have to do a facility, we're great at this. The largest plastic by weight in for employee waste are yogurt tubs. We get takeaway containers, but by weight, normally at the end of the day, at the end of the year, yogurt tubs dominate the plastic waste from employees, little ones and big ones. They dominate our plastic waste. But we're still only about half a ton of plastics for our normal plastic waste. However, because we're a laboratory, we actually dispose of about 1.5 tons of electronics. So we actually have to report for the electronics we dispose of. That takes us over the 1 ton limit here at our facility. So this is our facility reporting on the waste we generate. We generate a lot of electronics waste. We test and process a tremendous amount of thing. We have an entire warehouse of just appliances like refrigeration, HVAC type stuff, all the way through the back. We do tons of work there. Okay, where does appliance scope end? Like I make a boiler for a factory. We have to multi-crane it in through the hole we create in the ceiling. That's a really good point. Large appliances are in scope. Like they think of I love this because it's the exact same words. But large scale industrial tools are out. But they kind of mean a difference. They have a different definitions related to EU ROHS between large scale and large. Rule of thumb. Does the institutional, industrial, commercial, ICI, industrial, commercial, institutional building need to be modified to bring for the appliance to be brought inside? Wow, look at the English. I'll fix that in the final slides. By the way, everybody will receive a copy of these slides and with some better English than that. Basically, do you have to modify the building to get it in? Like, do you have to open up the entire roof and double crane it into the ceiling, or crane it into the ceiling, or we have to like open up the outer wall to get it in? Yeah, that's large scale. And or is the appliance larger than a 20-foot shipping container? So basically the pieces come in. Yes, individually the pieces are smaller than 20-foot shipping container, but the final HVAC unit is larger. It's not in scope. Doesn't really include ducting, but includes like basically the unit, the actual, if you're installing, I'm installing, an air conditioner instead of room by room in a hotel, central one for, 1,000 room hotel. The thing is gigantic. It's, much bigger than 20-foot shipping container. That's large scale. It's out. So there is a certain point where appliances will be outside of scope. Basically, if the entire thing you built doesn't fit inside a 20-foot shipping container, or and usually the same, it's usually and you'd have to modify the building to get in, or it can't even get it into the building. It sits outside, it's so massive. So this isn't like, hey, my hotel has a mini split in each room. Yeah, it doesn't count. Those are small. We're talking in a much larger entity, like an assembly line or a boiler for a factory, or something that, the best way is the entire finished version is bigger than a 20-foot shipping container. Those would not be in scope for UROHS. Those are large scale, which is bigger than large. A refrigerator, a consumer refrigerator is large. Something bigger than 20-foot shipping container is large scale. Those are not in scope of this. Their packaging still is, by the way, but the electronic is not. So it's a bit hand wavy, but it's when you get to big, massive things that are really probably going to outlive the building. They'll be around as long as the building's around. They're out of scope. And that's a bit of an interesting one. So you have a rooftop unit, it fit in a shipping container, it's in. You have a massive rooftop unit, would not fit in a shipping container. It's like takes 3 shipping containers to get all the pieces out. So that's the rule of thumb. So if yes to either one of these questions or both, you're out of scope as an appliance. This is really, really large scale. Now, if you're borderline, there's simplified ways to do your plastics, and I'll show you how we do the plastics. When you report plastics, it's way more complicated than you're used to. Like when you maybe sort your garbage for your blue bin, there's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on your plastic. It's way more complicated than that. It's the NAPCS, North American Product Commodity. Can't remember what the S stands for. It's supposed to be North American, but it's Canadian. And they have a lot more than the 7 plastics. It's not just the usual 7. So if you're doing packaging, some of your poly bags with low density polyethylene. 4, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean low density polyethylene. You're like, well, it says low density polyethylene. No, it can actually mean linear low density too, which is right there. So your Ziploc bags are normally linear low density. They have a 4 on them, but they're not the same plastic actually. It's it's a long story. It goes low density and then it starts to close, which have a lot of open bonds. Closes more bonds, becomes linear low density, and then closes most of the bonds and becomes high density. There's actually not a significant difference between low density and high density plastic. Um, you could have high density, like your cereal bag, that's slightly opaque one, believe it or not, is normally high density polyethylene, even though it looks very similar. It's slightly cloudy, which usually means it's high density. And then you could have polystyrene takeaway containers. And then if you have clamshells, they're normally PVC. So packaging has a decent range. It's a bit simpler though, and people are more used to these plastics. Your electronics are way more exciting. A lot of your connectors will be polyester, or the circuit board ones will be polybutyl terephthalate, which is another type of polyester. It's actually a different category. Your connectors, a lot of your white connectors inside your electronics are nylon. You might have some PTFE high temp wires. That's another category. Silicone, by the way, is not in scope. It's a rubber. We'll get into that later. So you have silicone wires not in there. Your circuit boards are actually a thermoset resin. They're epoxy. They're not in. Epoxies are in, but they're not normal plastic. So all the epoxies are in, my apologies. They're just not a thermoplastic. They're thermoset. They're all in scope. So the epoxy in your circuit board's in. Circuit boards are a bit complicated. We have an easier way to handle circuit boards. I'll explain. But all of these are plastics. So what you end up having to do is you don't report fans or air conditioners or water heaters. You report appliances. So you have to merge all of your plastic data for appliances. So all the fans you sold, we'll say, all the nylon in the fans gets added to the nylon in all of the air conditioners you sold, which added to all the nylon in the water heaters. They're all appliances. They get added together. You really don't report water heaters. You report kilograms or tons of nylon in appliances, and then tons of polyester in appliances, tons of low density polyethylene, etc. in appliances. So you report your appliances by category. You have to combine it with your import and sales data, and then you have to submit it into the regulatory services platform, which I'll explain a bit. Then you have to take your flexible plastic packaging. So the Canadian rules are basically if when you put something into your packaging or take it out, does it change shape? It's flexible, like your typical poly bag or a lot of your plastic wrap. But if you put it in and take it, it doesn't change shape, like a pill bottle or a oil bottle or that kind of thing, it's rigid. So you have to take your flexible packaging data, how much is polyethylene, et cetera, and combine it with your import and sales data, put it in your regulatory services. Because again, you're doing kilograms of high density polyethylene in flexible packaging, kilograms of low density polyethylene in flexible packaging. And then you have to do the same thing in rigid packaging. It's reported separately. You have to combine it with the import and sales data. You basically have to report your high density polyethylene in rigid plastics, the number of kilograms per year into the service platform. So it's a bit complicated, a lot of work. We're really good at this. The first time, it's awful. We've done it lots, so there are much easier ways to do this, by the way. Other fine details, out of scope of reporting. Not the metal, of course, is not a plastic. Glass and ceramic are not a plastic. Funnily enough, rubber is not a plastic, which makes it kind of interesting where rubber tires, I don't even talk about tires. Tires have to report to the plastics registry next year. There's not a lot of plastic in tires, a little bit of nylon in there, but most of it's rubber. They have a bit of Kevlar, but it's mostly rubber. Rubber is not a plastic. You don't have to report. And even the Canadian naming convention, it's not a plastic. And cellulose, so wood, paper, rayon is artificial cellulose. They're not reportable either. It has to be plastic. So your wood, your paper, all that's not reportable. So again, who's responsible? So I'll talk about facility waste. Now I've talked about products. Now I'll talk about waste generated by your facility this year. The brand owner has to report their facility's waste. If you're not located in Canada, it's the importer. But if it's your facilities, you're located here. And you can move it to someone else if both parties agree. So for the waste, plastic waste generated by your facility, this is separate of your products you sell and import. Everything I've talked about is products imported and sold, which are done by the brand owner. But if you have a business, you have to report the facility waste in 2026 from, say, operations, employee waste, restaurant services, anything you generate plastic waste from. And you say, well, it's fine. I got somebody else to take it away. Yeah, but you generated it. They disposed of it. You have to report generated. You're reporting how much you generated, not how much you put into whatever it ending up, because all of us hire somebody else to do it. There's very few of us that are taking it directly and putting it in landfill or recycling. There's somebody in between. It's you're reporting what you generated. And in Canada, so it has to be Canadian entities. So if you have a facility in Louisiana, it has nothing to do with this. It has to be Canadian facilities. You have to report in 2026 for your 2025 year all of the plastics you generated in your business. So this is not sold. This is generated as waste. So stuff that ends up in your blue bin or garbage bin in the back. So again, as talked about us, we generate about half a ton of plastic waste a year. We don't have to report a major plastic waste. However, we generate 1.5 tons of electronics waste a year, and we have to report that from our facility. So that's separate of the product reporting. Additional complexity is you don't sell one refrigerator. Actually, most of you don't sell a refrigerator. You sell other things that are similarish. You sell like 44 different ones. So what you have to do, and you also have to take your import and sales data. You'll need your import data, your sales data, because you have to report how much you imported. Now, if you're not the brand owner, other people's problems, and how much was sold. Again, if you're not the brand owner, it's their problem. And you report importation separately from sales. So you import the amount of polyester in your appliances imported into Canada in 2025 and for the 2026 year. For the consumer side, say it's the amount of nylon you import in your appliances in 2024 and the amount of nylon in your appliances you sold in 2024. And then you have to do it by province and territory. On the bright side, you don't have to know your provincial data. You can literally take the average population of each province and just say, I sold 1,000 units in Canada. I can now take the population where, Ontario and Quebec and BC make up 90% of the population of the country almost. You can just divide it by the population percentage. There's a formula. It's Excel math. Excel math's not so bad, but still you have to do it. And you have to report the kilogram of each plastic. You don't report the kilograms of appliances. You report the kilograms of nylon in your appliances, the kilograms of polyester, etc., which is not very exciting. So how do we do it? You can do it yourself too, but the first time is awful. So instead of creating, you have 41 different air conditioners. We'll say refrigerators here. You sell. We choose a representative one. what represents the other. We use it as a model. It's called the average bill of materials method. You can take one and we create a plastic data set from that product. And then we apply it to all the others. We just scale by weight. So this one was, we'll say 50 kilograms. This other refrigerator, 75. We just take the same data and we scale it, by 50% from 50 kilograms to 75. So we normally use one representative. We do one in decent detail, and then we then apply it to all the others. You just scale it by weight. We also have, there's some really complex things, like often the outer housings and pieces like the shelves are pretty obvious in a refrigerator. A lot of you mean like your outer housing of the outer piece of your water cooler is probably pretty obvious too. But your more complicated things, you have circuits and you have wiring and circuit boards and pumps and compressors. What we've done is we've done so much of this, we've created models for cables and internal and external, and models for circuit boards. Any circuit board might have a little different plastic than the next one, but in general, on average, they end up averaging out. And there's a lot of different plastics in a circuit board. So what we do is create models. So imagine we do an iPad. You take two different tablet manufacturers. The innards are almost within like second decimal place, exactly the same plastics. What makes them different is the outer housing, the big pieces. One outer housing is ABS, and the other one's, ABS polycarbonate. That is actually the biggest difference. And that's where it's your big plastics will be the biggest difference between your product and someone else's. The internal bits, the circuit boards, the wiring, it all usually comes out on average being roughly the same. And then of course we do pumps and compressors. They're rubber heavy and metal heavy. It's not as much to report, mostly wires, but trying to figure out like your compressor or your pump, all the different plastics in it. Oh goodness help you. We've created models. It's just so much easier. And so what you end up reporting, we do it by column. The official one you'll see is by row. You have to report the polyester by kilogram imported into Canada. If you make products in Canada, manufactured, placed in the market, and then by province. And then you do other thermoplastic polyester, which is polybutyl terephthalate. It's the little mostly green connectors and red connectors in your circuit board. And then low density polyethylene, which is a polybag type material, but low density polyethylene is not uncommon inside products actually. And then we do the same again for your packaging, your flexible packaging and your rigid packaging. You have to report them separately. So on the bright side, the government expectation. So I presented the medical conference 3 weeks ago. Anyways, the person presented before me was the head of this program for Canada, and he was nodding along with this part too. In year one, they're expecting to be good enough. The perfection, it's order of magnitude 1 ton, 10 tons, 100 tons. That's what they really care about. Year two, they expect to be better. And year three, the best. Best isn't perfect, but the best that's really going to happen. This Now, where do you do all this? Where you find it? By the way, I'm going a little bit fast. A lot of this is give you content that you can go back afterwards, or at least be able to ask the question. So there's a plastic registry submission website. It's got a lot of acronyms. They could throw a lot of letters in there. It's fantastic. And it's got French and English all in one thing. It's the regulatory services platform. It's the regulatory services platform, but it's only currently for the plastic registry. You sign in like you do a lot of government things, either with your bank or your government in Canada key. You're like, wait a minute, this isn't the company thing. This is my personal tax ID. Yes, it's your personal tax ID. But I'm doing this for my company. I know. So what ends up happening is you come in as prove who you are, use your personal ID, and then you create the entity under the tax ID of the company inside it. It's a little bit complicated. We can help you with it. But you can go in through your bank or through a GC key. You need one of the two. Now, Canadian citizen, signing with your bank is really easy. If you're not, you can get it, any non-Canadian can get a GC key. They just will eventually need a Canadian entity to be an entity in there to report, but anyone can get a GC key. You just, there's a sign up thing for it. It's really easy, the government of Canada key. Since you don't pay taxes in Canada, if you're non-Canadian, it's actually pretty harmless for you. So you need to sign in with the bank or have a GC key. Sign in a bank, notice all the Canadian banks, you just pick one. If a GC key, you can get a GC key instead, or you can have both. It's a simple sign up. If you're a non-Canadian citizen, GC key is really the only way you can do that. Which a non-Canadian get a GC key, no problem. It's really easy. There's a sign up. When you get in, you'll get a dashboard. So next thing is you can't do much in it until they do the update in a couple weeks. Not exactly sure when it's going to be done. Supposedly July. We're in July. But where do you actually find the reporting template? There is an Excel file to put this data in. It's in here. You can't find it by Googling it. The reason being is if it's on the Government of Canada website, it has to meet certain accessibility requirements. It has to work with different languages, different software platforms, etc. So if it's inside this platform, it doesn't have to meet the Government of Canada accessibility rules. So everything of interest is inside here. But because it's inside, when we need a tax ID to get in, you can't find it with Google. So the reporting template is an Excel file in here. You have to click there under guided support. And then when you open it up, you're going to have to hit program support. And then the plastic registry one, that one's a little more self-evident. And then when you're in it, there's FAQ and there's a pull down under the FAQ for resources. Click on that pull down and then the button resources. And there's the file. There's also some other guidances. This is actually going to be some other good stuff in here too. Some guidances, how to use the website. And this will be updated a whole bunch of other good stuff and examples, supposedly this month, according to the webinar last week. But the actual Excel file is right there. By the way, we're still like 2 months from now, and you're like, oh my God, I have consumer products. I'm not going to make it in time. You can apply individually, not as an industry, but individually for an extension, like you could for PFAS. Any companies can apply individually if needed. It's very similar to the SEPA PFAS stuff that happened over the past year. There's the email address. You just email them. You're gonna have to state why you need it, how far you've gotten, and what use it is the Canadian government to give you more time. But you can probably get up to at least 3 months of extension. So individually, companies can apply for an extension, which is right there. Again, you're reporting all this stuff, all the different plastics. In reality, this is the way we do it internally because columns are a lot easier to manage the data. Then we have to turn it into the real reporting. This is actually what you report. This is what the Excel file looks like. I'm not going to go into intimate detail, but you can see above for electrical appliances, which is yours, you have to report your polyester, then your other thermoplastic polyester, then your high density polyethylene, then other polyethylene. If you use like modern heater wire or power cord wire, the outer is a chlorinated polyethylene, polyethylene. The inside is cross-linked polyethylene, which is other polyethylene. The internal wires for often indoor power cords are a different type of polyethylene called cross-linked polyethylene. So you have to report each one separately, how much acrylonitrile, butadiene, styrene, ABS you have, how much PVC, etc. for all of your appliances. Again, you don't report fridges or stoves or cool water heaters. You report appliances. It's the total plastic for appliances, the total plastics of each type for your flexible packaging, and the total plastics of each type for your rigid packaging. And there's a way we put all this together, especially from represented products. We can help you. It looks pretty daunting, and it is. If you do it the first time, it's a lot. Once you've done it about 40 or 50 times like us, it's not so bad. And so we create a lot of tools and processes. Again, we have a lot of experience in this. We're gonna get to Q&A in a section. The deadline for consumer, by the way, again, is September 2025, and industrial is September 2026. So reminder, the big difference is, does the consumer have decision of disposal? So even though you sell the water heater to a residence and you normally take back as a business the old one, since the consumer has decision, that water heater sold to residences is consumer. And that's it for the main content. I was going a little fast. So Q&A, feel free to put questions in the control panel. I'm going to fiddle a bit so I can bring up the Q&A
Yeah.
panel.
Well, you know what? I can read them to you, so your hands free, and you can
Well, I'll
focus
get
on
both.
answering if
Okay,
you'd
you can
like.
do it at the same time. That's great. Yep.
Wonderful. Well, we've got some in chat I'm going to address first because they came in earlier.
Mhm.
One of them being, can you apply for an extension to the September 2025 date?
I love it when people are looking for the exact question. Hopefully I get later in. It usually means hopefully I've done my homework. I can see a thumbs up that I actually got this. That's a really good piece, this.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yep. So yes, you can, but it's company individual, and you have to send it to that email address. It'll be in the slides. It's the plastic registry email address. But you're gonna have to meet a couple of requirements. And if you don't, that's fine. They're gonna send it back to you with these requirements. What have you done so far? Because they want to make sure you're working on it. What are you gonna do to complete it? And what value is that to them? Now, normally, if you say you're going to complete it, that is the value to them. So that's pretty straightforward. So they'll have an expectation for you to justify. They're going to want to know you're working on it. So you got to say well, you're working on it, and what if you give the extension, what additional data you'll get, which is really good.
Oh, got another interesting question for you here. Why would we need to report facility waste, for example, yogurt containers, when the yogurt manufacturer needs to report this? Would this not be double counting?
Fantastic question. So you're not actually reporting the plastics in yogurt containers. You're reporting the plastic in yogurt containers imported into Canada, the the plastic in yogurt containers sold in Canada, which is be them, and your facilities, what plastic waste did you generate? There are actually three different reporting requirements. There's actually a fourth one, manufactured. If you make products in Canada, there's a manufactured one too. But it's import, manufacture, sold, and generated. So your business generates the plastic waste for your employees. So you report under generated. You could end up reporting all of them. Might end up having imported, manufactured, sold, and generated. There are four different sections. It's a really good question.
Thank you so much. We got one from the Q&A button. We are a subsidiary with our own EIN. Can we use our details to determine if we need to report, or must we use our parent company's details?
If you have your own business ID, you can use your own details. So at that point in time, you have choices. The default is the corporate ID you exist under, and you can use that for tonnages and all that. However, you can choose as a business because you can make an agreement. The business, say a larger group has business units, they can agree to report in common or report separately. So default is by Canadian tax ID. However, you can agree to report together if there's advantage in it. So that's a choice because you can move your responsibility reporting to another entity if they both decide. So imagine Acme owns three different appliance businesses, and they have actually separate company and tax IDs in Canada. They would report separately normally, but they can choose to report together under Acme if they choose, or in any combination. So the default is by tax ID, but you can choose to do it in common. So like an interesting one in reality. So for those who know, like not knowing anything about their internal workings, but the public eye, Canadian Tire owns the brand and it owns a real estate company that owns the actual stores. But the contents of the store and the operation of the store are usually owned by an individual who owns the contents and the cost. So the waste generated by the Canadian Tire facility would normally be by the owner of the store, the contents. Now, Canadian Tire, the franchise, or it's kind of not even franchise, they have a funny different name for it. Those entities could agree with Canadian Tire, and Canadian Tire could report for everybody, but Canadian Tire would have to choose to do so because they just own the building, but the business operating inside of it, the one generating, are owned by individuals. So there's a lot of different combinations here.
Wonderful answers. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to the chat for this one. How much should we budget to have a consultant complete the data search and report for the plastics registry?
That's a great question. Feel free to reach out. It's completely based on what you're doing. It could be thousands of dollars. It could be tens of thousands. It really depends what you're at. It normally doesn't end up being much above that. Even if like you're one of the major brands of say air conditioning, it doesn't make that much difference. Facilities depends how many facilities you have, but it's in the same. It's either thousands or tens of thousands at most, and low levels of that.
Going back to the Q&A, is this one-time reporting or annual?
Annual. So it's annual and it escalates each year a little bit. So this year, like the first year is going to be import, sold, manufactured, and then generated. And then there's going to be streams of disposal afterwards. So of what you've generated, what percentage is recycled, what percentage is garbage, which percentage is composted. So it's annual and they'll be escalating slightly. It'll have everything the year before had, and then some more nuance on disposal.
Thank you, Bruce. It's been covered, but someone would like you just to go over it one more time. The filters, if you could go over the filters to determine if my company needs to report, for example, entity or brand owner.
Brand owner first. The brand owner is if the brand owner exists in Canada. So if you're bringing in for LG, LG Canada is here. If it's like Golden Star and Golden Star doesn't have an entity here, then it's the import, which could be a distributor actually. Then the amount of plastic packaging and or plastic products. So electronics is a plastic product. So it's not the amount of plastic in your appliance, it's the amount of appliance. If either over 1 ton, you're in. So it's brand owner over 1 ton a year of packaging, plastic packaging, or plastic products over 1 ton of electronics. Again, if you're not the brand owner, it's their problem. Now, your facility, it's 1 ton of plastic waste generated,
Thank you.
which is, yeah.
One last question, and again, we have a few more minutes left. So if anyone has got more questions, please let us know. What is the definition of brand owner in Canada?
That's a good question. Who has the legal right? So who's responsible for the brand on the front of the product? There's a whole bunch in the Q&A, a bunch of definitions when you have co-branded and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it gets into intimate detail, but who's responsible for the brand in Canada? Sometimes that can be moved to a distributor. Um, that is a really good legal question. There is a bunch of stuff in the FAQ, but it's who's legal responsible for the brand on the front of the product.
I actually skipped over one. So if we don't have a Canadian tax ID, we don't need to report.
No, not directly. So your importer might need information from you, but no, you're not a reporter. You actually can't. You can transfer, you could choose to report for somebody else, but you have to basically, what you'd have to do is say, you know what, it's too complicated. I can do it for you. And then you have to have a Canadian entity actually do the physical reporting. We can't see that happening very often. So you can, but you don't have to. No.
One came in chat here from Nicholas. Are there resources available for identifying or estimating plastics and wire harnesses, circuit boards, etc.? Or do we need to do a supply chain survey like we did with PFAS?
It's not very successful in the supply chain. You could try. We haven't seen any success with complex products. Oh, we have all of that. So anybody doing work, it's all embedded in. And the nice thing about it is you're not paying for the circuit board models. You're paying for like 1% of the circuit board models because we do so much of it. So it makes it really cost efficient. And it's easier for us too.
Really good. I love Q&A sessions like this. A lot of great questions and a lot of good information getting out there. You will, like you said, be setting the presentation. Send that over to me, and I will get that out to everyone who registered for today and everyone who attended. Otherwise, this is going to be on HRAI's YouTube page as well if people need to review a lot of the information. And people can reach out to you if they need to, right?
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely. Feel free to reach out. I'm a pretty
Perfect.
public person. Any contact at Cleggan, they know where to find me. I'm happy to help. We also have lots of people who know this stuff here, so lots of people can help.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, well, one last check of the old Q&A box. Don't see any more. I think with that, we will call it a show. Thank you so much, Bruce, for coming on, letting us know about this important initiative and how HVAC stakeholders can keep up with it, essentially. Yeah,
Well, thanks everyone, and a pleasure and great questions.
thank you. And we got to thank you in the question and answer as well. So there you go. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and just check out HRI's event page for future webinars. Until then, we'll see you at the next show. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Oh, my pleasure. Cheers,
Take it
everyone.
easy. Cheers.